So this sweater vest thing is terribly convenient. It makes you warm, and depending on what else I'm wearing, not at the moment, but if I were wearing a polo shirt or something, this thing can make you warm without doing anything to restrict arm motion or whatever you're doing with your hands. I can wash dishes in a sleeveless shirt and still be slightly warmer by wearing this sweater vest thing on top of it. So I wear this thing for practicality. And how do they reward me? My daughters accuse me of looking adorbs when I wear this. I reject that hypothesis. I don't think adorbs is a manly quality, and I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I doubt very much that I look it. On the other hand, I don't even know what it is exactly. So I suppose it's possible. Anyway, you don't need to know that. What you need to know is last semester I taught great plays and philosophy at HKBU. First time I've ever taught it, and I believe first time we've ever taught it at HKBU, unless there was some course decades ago that's since been that's dropped out of the course list and been reinstated. I don't think that's the case. So Great Plays and Philosophy is a course where we look at, obviously, great plays and philosophy, and that means we go both ways. We look at what some great philosophers say about drama. We look at Plato's Republic and Nietzsche's The Birth of Tragedy and Aristotle's Poetics. And also, I like to look at Plutarch's response to Plato. And off the top of my head, I don't even remember much, but I'm sure there was some other stuff we looked at in philosophy that was about drama. But we also want to look at the dramas philosophically. We want to look at great plays and what they say about philosophy, or what they say about the topics philosophy is interested in. Or maybe we should say, we want to look at how philosophy is done in the great plays, which is quite literally true. Shakespeare is a philosopher in that he is a seeker of wisdom, and it's hard to find a better seeker of wisdom than Shakespeare. He's not doing it in quite the same way a philosopher is doing it, well, a professional philosopher, but he's certainly seeking wisdom. And as we are seeking wisdom in the manner of those we normally categorize as philosophers, the Plato's, Aristotle's, Aquinas, Kant, Descartes, Locke, William James, all these guys, when we're seeking wisdom in the manner of these characters, it would be foolish to completely ignore the seeking of wisdom in the manner of Shakespeare, Dostoevsky, and J.R.R. Tolkien. So in this course, we look at a certain number of great plays, and we look at what they say about the things the philosophers are talking about, and note a few connections between these great plays and their themes and philosophy. In that more narrow sense, philosophy in terms of what people like Kant and Descartes and Aquinas and Plato and Aristotle do. Now, before beginning, let's summarize what we can expect in this series. I expect to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8 videos in this series after this introductory video. And they will be one video for each of the plays we looked at in that particular course. So in the Greek unit, 2 plays, Aeschylus, Eumenides, and Sophocles, Oedipus Rex. In the Shakespeare unit, Hamlet, Macbeth, and The Merchant of Venice. And then in the, for lack of a better one catch-all term, the postmodern unit, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead by Tom Stoppard, The Bald Soprano by Eugene Ionesco, and then Waiting for Godot, of course. Waiting for Godot, unless it's Waiting for Godot, but we can talk about pronunciation later if we need to. Before finishing this video and beginning the first one on Aeschylus, let's briefly talk about why we should care about great plays and philosophy. Here's a partial answer. Using some words from my homeboy, Brian Godowa, in the foreword to this nifty book, story incarnates a sense of morality. So let's make some distinctions. It's one thing to understand mentally some moral principle, to have a mental comprehension of some moral principle, but it's another thing to be able to live by it. Confucius has a memorable remark where he talks about his best student, Yan Hui, and he says, we initially seemed kind of stupid. Well, I'm borrowing from English translations here. If you're not one of my students at HKBU, maybe you don't know how to read the original. I don't either. But you can find the James Legge translation on the internet. You can find the Charles Muller, I think that's the name, the Charles Muller translation on the internet. And there are any number of other translations. Hopefully, if English is your second or third language, you can find the Analects translated into your first or second language. But I can't promise anything. All right, what was I talking about? Confucius looks at Yan Hui, and he says that this guy never talks in class. He's the quiet student. He listens, apparently, but he doesn't say much. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't challenge what the teacher says, as if he were just sitting there stupidly, or something like that. And then Confucius observes the life of Yan Hui and sees that he's applying these principles. He applies what Confucius teaches in his own life. And that's how Confucius learned that this guy is not stupid. In fact, Yan Hui turned out to be his best student. So it's one thing to have a mental understanding of some moral principle and another to live by it. Now here's something else, another distinction. It's one thing to have a mental understanding of some moral principle, and it's another thing to know how to apply it to particular complicated circumstances. So Kant says, Immanuel Kant, moral philosopher, says, we need a judgment sharpened by experience to know how moral law applies to particular circumstances. And then here's something else, and I think this could be categorized as a fourth thing. It's one thing to have a mental understanding of some moral principle, first, and second, it's another thing to be able to live by it. Third, it's another thing to know how to apply it in particular complicated circumstances. Of course, these things overlap, but they're not exactly the same thing. And then fourth, to understand how a moral principle takes on flesh, borrowing again from the words of God, or how story incarnates a sense of morality. That's what we're interested in here in particular. It's not like we're not interested in the other philosophical topics, but we're very much interested in that. We're interested in how a moral concept, how a moral principle takes on flesh. So this is what Jesus does in the New Testament. He doesn't just state the moral principle. He tells a story. Matthew chapter 18, the parable of the ungrateful servant, is a spectacular example. So let me pull up Matthew 18, and let's see if I can see what sort of statement of moral principle Jesus gives us. The principle is forgive your brother from your heart. Forgive people for what harm they've done to you. And there's a theological principle it's attached to. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. Forgive. If you would be forgiven by God, you forgive others. That's the theological and moral principle. But how does Jesus get this across? He doesn't just state it. Instead, he tells this story. I'm borrowing from the ESV. And rather than just try to paraphrase it, why on earth would I need to do that? Let's read it. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. Since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. But when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, which is much, much less than 10,000 talents. And seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, pay what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, have patience with me, and I will pay you. He refused and went and put him in prison till he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him and said to him, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? And in anger his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. Now you see how it's better to include the story than just to say, my heavenly Father will punish you fairly if you don't forgive your brother from your heart. Or just to say, forgive your brother from your heart. He gives the theological principle. He also tells the story. And we might have been much better off with the story and without the statement of the moral principle. But as it is, we have both. I think we're best off with both. And if you want to make these distinctions, maybe this is more distinguishing than is necessary. We have the statement of the moral principle, we have the theological connection, and we have the story. We have all three, and I think we're best off with all three. So that's what this series is largely about. Not that we're not interested in epistemology, but we're very much interested in this series in how story incarnates a sense of morality. How, like the parables of Jesus the Messiah, a great work of dramatic literature can contain and give flesh to a moral principle.